I had a clear vision that I wanted to work in this shop at 430 Kings Road, and once I had made that happen, which I was very clear I would do, mainly because I was doing a very similar thing down in my hometown, adapting clothes in a sort of punk way, the same thing really, taking 50s things but exaggerating them. I absolutely knew that this place at the end of King's Road should have been, well, it was made for me really, and I knew I'd feel comfortable and happy there, and be able to challenge and push those boundaries a bit further, because of course you can do that when you're in London as well. And so I got a job there, and I still maintained my own identity. Now, it wasn't a question of me walking into that place and just sort of wearing the clothes and taking on Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren's identity. I was very much allowed, and would have insisted anyway, on being completely and utterly my own person. But very, very in tune with the things that they were doing. These wonderful tactile clothes, like the rubber wear and the leather wear, and juxtaposed with this wonderful, iconic imagery that Jamie Reid did for the Sex Pistols, and it was just a melting pot of the most beautiful things, thought-provoking things as well. And I could feel free to add my own certain element to it, and it was a great thing to be surrounded by people that I thought were like-minded as well, and people who were bold and not afraid to speak up and be themselves. Well, I actually don't have a great memory of meeting Derek, but he does. I think in his one of his books he said that he first saw me walking across Victoria Station in various clothing. He's very descriptive about how I was dressed, and it obviously drew him to the fact that he liked the way I looked, and then sometime later he came to the shop at 430 Kings Road with a plan to make a Super 8 movie based on the punk scene on the Kings Road at the time. And I asked me if I would help him, and I said of course I would. As with a lot of people who seem to meet Derek and understand him, they all felt like they'd known him sort of all their lives in a way. It was you felt immediately very comfortable with him and not at all suspicious of him. So I said I would do that, and we'd get our heads together, and I'd take him around a few places to show him, what was happening on the scene, clubs, gigs, what have you, discos, and we left it at that. And then some time after that, he came back and said he was going to make a scripted film, and that was Would I Like a Part in It, which was all a little. He was in the shop. He came to the shop, and I was sort of kind of taken aback, really, because I hadn't envisaged acting in it. But nevertheless, again, as with most things with Derek, you just thought, well, that'll go for it. Have a go, yeah. Jordan's dance was actually part of the film, though. It was scripted as part of the storyline of the film. He made a separate video of it, I think, Super 8 of it. And again, he knew about my background in dance and the fact that I was, very deeply involved with ballet for many years from a very young person. And very cleverly wanted to sort of transpose my look onto the ballet side of it, and I think it worked absolutely beautifully. I mean, I feel very proud that he did such a great job of that film, and also that not many directors as such could pick up a camera and know exactly what they were doing and get the absolute best out of somebody. And it was improvised as well. I mean, I did it in 2 takes, and it was very painful because you had to dance on concrete basically with rubble. It wasn't a normal way of being on point, and I had quite a sore feet, bleeding feet afterwards. The bonfire burnt my legs through my tights. Superficial burns, but it wasn't very comfortable. But just one got swept up in that beauty of it all, and the fact, when you look back on it, you think Derek took that. It's himself. It really gets to you. Really, I think it's a very heartfelt and sweet feeling it gives me when I see it. He was very clever at looking in depth at people and trying to get the very best out of them, but without, surprisingly enough, without this sort of over-coaching. In fact, he wasn't somebody who coached you. He wasn't somebody that wanted to change you. He wasn't somebody who wanted to mould you. He wanted you to bring something to his project, and he wanted, if possible, to let it be and to let it stand on its own. And I think that's a remarkable thing for a director and a writer. It was a very, very strange time. I mean, I remember very clearly, we had this flat in Buckingham Gate, which is just up the road from Buckingham Palace, actually near Birdcage Walk. And it was a very famous flat where everybody came, who was anybody really, Pistols and Adam and the Ants, and we had Sid and Nancy staying there, Derek Dunbar and Simon Barker. I mean, it was just a happening place. And whilst I was staying there in the middle of the filming of this, of Jubilee, and, when you think of what was coming and going at the time that I was filming that, it was really very strange. I mean, the Heartbreakers came over from New York, and they were staying there. I was sewing feathers on my tutu up until sort of 3 in the morning, and then we were off to Deptford to do this take of the ballet. I didn't want to rehearse it. I don't work well with rehearsing things, certainly not in dancing. So I just wanted to be free and do this dance, but all behind me was this scenario of this mad flat and all this going on and not any sleep. And, and if anyone watches Jubilee, you can sort of just think, well, she probably didn't get any sleep the night before any of that. We had a script for Jubilee, and also, if you notice, my part, a lot of it was read from books, these lovely little scribbled books, which were, I'd love to know where they ever went, because they are just beautiful in themselves. And it was scripted, a lot of it was scripted, but on the other hand, I mean, I remember certainly several scenes where I wasn't happy with my performance, and I turned to Derek and said, I'd really like to do this again. And he said, no, please don't. And I said, but, I could, I was really trying to convince him. I can do it better. Certainly the one where I've got the diary open, and I said, and anyway, I wanted to defy gravity. I mean, it's a really difficult thing, wanted to defy gravity. And I thought, I could say that better and I could do it better, the whole scene. And he absolutely flatly refused. And, and that wonderful laugh of his, and just said, no. This is perfect and it's exactly as I want it. So I had to, bow down to his superior knowledge on the matter. And as everyone knows, he liked that fallibility in people, which is, again, a great thing, really. It's a visionary thing, in a way. What was great about Derek as well, I mean, it's that love again, that thing where everybody seemed to be very happy to work for him. Some of these people were very, very well established. Peter Middleton, Chris Hobbs. They were people who were doing these things almost on their own time as a gift to him. And I think that just gave such a wonderful vibe to the whole thing, and a wonderful feeling that everyone was giving of themselves, and it wasn't just like we start here, we finish here. It was an event, and everybody was really enjoying it, and even behind the camera. I mean, I felt a little bit cheated because none of my makeup was done by anybody, and I turned up every day as I was in my own clothes, and I wrecked my boots, my lovely Vivienne Westwood boots on that film. And everyone else was in wardrobe, and I just ended up sort of just turning up, as I was. And the only technical problem, actually, was my hair, because obviously over 6-7 weeks of filming, I think it took, your hair grows a little bit. And also, I started off with a bit of roots, and you have to keep keeping that, otherwise, continuity-wise, it doesn't look right. So I had to comb peroxide through my hair all the time. So over-peroxide it so that it would keep blending into the roots all the time. Mm.
Well, your look is amazing in the film with the makeup and...
Well, it's just how I woke, you know,
so
how I did it.
How you work.
Every day.
Wow.
That was, again, he just took me from the shop and put me in a film. It was that, it's that simple, really. But I did feel a little bit cheated that I didn't get any wardrobe time. There's a great technical little thing, actually. The Royal Britannia dance, that helmet, was really uncomfortable. It was metal. I mean, it wasn't a plastic one. And it was really sore on the back of your neck. And it also didn't fit. And I had to borrow Derek's beret. That's all we had. He was standing side stage right. And, you know, we didn't know what to do. There was you know, that, again, that theatre, the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, had been lent to him for just a very short time by a friend. So there was no, you know, no payment involved, but we had a very strict timing on how long we could stay there, because I think it was the chorus line that was on there at the time, and it was all mirrored. That was their set. So we had to get this done quickly. So there was no running around. You know, if that didn't fit, that helmet, we had to think of something. So he just gave me his. And if you look closer, you'll see it's Derek's beret underneath. Improvisation. Well, I felt, I have to be absolutely honest, I was kind of a bit uncomfortable about certain actressy things that there were. I'm not totally comfortable with, let me just say, I'd rather probably have method acting, that style, rather than something that was more formal. And I think probably, truthfully, it was a little foray, a little insight into the acting world for me, which I thought, well, I'm not actually that bothered about acting. If it means that, I'd rather act, you know, in the way Derek wanted me to act, which was just an improvised way, really.
So people had different approaches to what they were
Everyone,
doing.
yes, everyone had different approaches. I also think, to a certain extent, you know, the naivety that I bring to that film, which I think is really good, is refreshing, because I wasn't trying to grab extra lines or trying to upstage anybody or trying to steal a scene as actors and actresses sometimes do, not all. And I felt that I just was really comfortable in how I acted it without having to step on anyone else's toes. What I did was, you know, me, really. I mean, there's a really nice little bit that probably no one would ever notice, but I clearly remember feeling very good about it. And it was the part when Toya and I kill the policeman, and, you know, she's jabbing him with a machine gun, and I'm kicking him, and he's screaming, and Toya bursts out crying afterwards in this massive torrent of hysterical tears. And if you look at it, and I walk away, I just thought, I really was in the moment, and I wanted to act like if it was me, what would I do? No thought of acting, but just clearly, if it was me, after that, expending all that violent energy, what would I do? And I walk away and sit on a little wall and just put my head in my hands. That's the kind of acting that I like. You know, it's more non-acting in a way. It's trying to put yourself in the position of being there at the time. A lot of it was done on different sets, so we weren't around at the same time as that was being done, and they weren't around at the same time as we were doing our bits. And you know, I'll be absolutely honest with you, the film's grown on me enormously over the years, and I think it probably has become more and more popular as it's gone on. I certainly have had that feeling over the last 2 or 3 years, since the sort of anniversary of punk, if you like, and there's an enormous amount of love for that film. And I think that sort of mixture of that very formal acting as such, the language of flowers and, you know, all of that type of beautiful words, I think they work really well as a stark difference to the punk aspect of it and the violence, because it is quite a violent film, I think. And I think these days, you know, violence, it shows its violence because of that naturalness of it. It's not violence where you're standing back and just shooting somebody from a distance, or it's hands-on violence, and I think that's I think it's very powerful. There were some lines that were political lines that were drawn in that time, and it really annoyed me because, you know, although for instance, I grew up in Sussex, and that meant that maybe I had to be middle class, and probably people thought Derek was as well. You know, I wasn't in any particular. We had no money. You know, we weren't from a moneyed family. And I think, you know, punk is an attitude and it's a state of mind. And if anybody was punk, then Derek Jarman was. Because he had no rules. I mean, you know, there was nothing. That's, you know, the way I act in that film and the way I dance in that film, and, you know, and it's so anti-establishment as well. You know, what more is there than that to punk, really? And I don't think it matters what people think, just because he had a great diction and a wonderful voice, why anyone would think, you know, that he was anything but. And the way he directed was very punk as well. It's yeah, it's actually very bold, because, you know, when you think he had not much money for that film, and it's somebody else's money, and it's very bold to take big risks with somebody else's money when you really can't go back and film it again.
Well, it's funny, the elements that might seem not very punk, almost years later, almost make it feel more punk now. The kind of mixture altogether
I agree.
Makes it more punk than other films, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's not exactly what you expect at all. It comes from different directions. Very, very much so. Yeah, it's it still shocks people. It's you know, not in a screaming, I can't sleep at night way, but it shocks people because of the depth and the difference of the storyline that weaves in and out, and quite often the violence is quite sudden in it, and also it's meaningful. I think the violence, it's not gratuitous in any way. There was a lot of bomb sites, or, you know, a lot of demolition going on at the time. A lot of places that were, I guess, supposed to be redeveloped and never actually got the money for it. So they were just left as big hangars. I think the dance that we did was next to a great big hangar that was just empty. All it was a metal shell. And yes, it was very bleak. Lots of hoardings, lots of boarded up places. I remember, you know, that scene at the cafe. You know, all that area was really very run down as well. And it's a shame, because you see these little old pubs that had beautiful tiling outside, you know, that lovely, beautiful old tiling, that old ceramics. And they were obviously struggling or closed. And yes, it was a depressing sight. It's interesting, because he could have made it really sort of very obscure, if you like. But he made that poster to be as punchy as the film was. There's a really funny story about that, actually, because he never told me he'd got some money to put the posters up on the Underground. So I'm on the Underground one day, just chugging along, going from Green Park somewhere, and you know, as you see something just flash by, and I thought, it's a bit odd, it was like me. And I got off. I mean, I'm dressed exactly like the poster, because that's what I wore every day. And I got off on the station, and everyone's just looking, and it's massive posters, you know, those great big ones, and I'm sitting there going, standing there going, and there's people looking at me, looking at the poster, and I thought, oh, you could have told me. And for every station, for, I don't know, half the line, there were all these posters. So I said to him, you could have told me. I got off on that station, everyone's looking at me. And it's unmistakable because it's exactly the same makeup. Didn't have the helmet on though, thank God. Thing is, that's why I say it's so anti-establishment, because it really is poking the finger at corporates. And in a way, it's rather poignant and sad at the end, where everyone's lifting their glasses, you know, and has been bought, basically. And of course, it's a great prophecy, really, because really that's what happened to the music business. I mean, I didn't make more films, mainly because I went into the music business through Adam and the Ants and through another band later on. And so that was my choice, was to go to that route. But that route also was, you know, just brought up by accountants and people with a great lack of intuition and talent. Gone were those days of, you know, you had people who were great scouts, great proponents of new things. You know, it had just become money orientated, and also a great lack of investment, I think, for want of a better word, in longevity and in bands. I guess, you know, it's media, it's the way media's gone. Very powerful. It's very hard to beat it, of course. You know, if we go back to originally what he said was, you know, could I help him with, you know, showing him around places, when it was going to be this Super 8 film, because I was working with Adam and the Ants at the time, Adam's wearing all my clothes in that shot. That's my bondage trousers and my bondage jacket. And I said, well, he'd be great for it. And also, very recently, Jane Rogers, who also was, you know, then Wayne County, Electric Chairs, he's just said on radio, you know, just a few months ago, that I was the person who picked them for it as well. Because Derek and I went down to Dingwalls and to audition Jane. And that's how he got the part.
So you really had quite a creative input in
the
film.
Well, because I had that background knowledge of it, you know, that these were bands that, you know, I thought were really talented, and also people that I thought would really fit in well with the film. And, you know, Jane is just such a great person, very knowledgeable, great, very, very hard-hitting performer still. Yeah, and it worked out really well, I think. He's kind of a caricature in a way, isn't he? I've got no idea if David knew about Derek. It was a very strange time because he was there to promote Just a Gigolo, which was the film he was in at the time. And he spotted me from outside they had this funny little sort of trellis work at the Carlton. It was a party, a big party, and called me over because, I mean, you know, not stupid, but it does make a good picture. And I had to explain to him, you know, that I was here with Jubilee and a film called Jubilee, and he said he was with Just a Gigolo, and he had a great big cast of blokes, you know, that were all extras, that were hired all in tuxedos, you know, models, and there's me stuck in the middle of them. So I'm not sure that he actually ever got to see it, but he was a great bloke, David, and he also was very clever at I don't know, you know, utilising other genres and styles. It's not. I wouldn't say it's stealing anything, because he always made things better, I think, and improved things. He was a chameleon, if you like, and somebody who always kept his eye on the ball, and I think that's probably why he was attracted to the way I looked and wanted me to come and have photos with him. They'd never seen anyone look like me, and it's France, and, you know, again, it's what I'm saying, this country has got something quite very, very special about it. And they just went mad. We got robbed the first night, of course.
What happened?
It's a nightmare. We all went out, Derek and Jenny and I went out, and when we got back, we were on a budget, and we were in a fairly cheap little hotel, which was fine. We got back, and Jenny and I were sharing a room, and the window was open. There was a slanting roof to our room. Window was open, and they'd taken all of Jenny's clothes, none of mine, funnily enough. Suitcase was open, nothing gone. Must have looked and thought, what am I going to do with that? But there was a makeshift knife in the room, which was found on the radiator, which was a blade which was just tied to a wooden handle, handmade handle. And Jenny had no clothes. She'd gone to the Cannes Film Festival without any clothes. So luckily, because she was wearing all these men's tuxedo type things, Derek whizzed out and bought us some more clothes. And my handbag and my passport was gone. And that caused quite a bit of trouble getting back to England, because we flew back. We drove there, flew back. And it was pretty worrying, actually, because they didn't like the look of me, of course, and having to get a temporary passport in France when they really don't like the look of you. They tried to stop me getting on the plane because I was inappropriately dressed. The only way I actually ended up getting on the plane was Derek gave me his Mac, and I walked across the tarmac and got on, because they wouldn't let me board it, wearing all that rubber gear. We argued, Derek and I arguing away, but it made no difference. So that was Cannes for you. And it only just got a certificate, of course. You're probably aware of that. No?
No. What's the story there?
Crikey. I mean, Derek had this megalovision set up, you know, in Holland Park, this office. And the film, he had Cannes sorted out, he had the premiere worked out, dates, everything. And then, out of the blue, he presumed, I think, that everything was going to be fine. He got a phone call from the British Board of Film Censors to say, I think it was Roger Furman, was it? David Furman? James Furman, yes. To say that unfortunately it had failed completely, uncertificated on a few levels. And Derek was absolutely beside himself, because sometimes, you know, there is a prospect that they were never going to give a certificate to it if it was that much wrong with it. Which is why it's an X, of course. It failed the X certificate. So he had to go in and sit with James Furman. He addressed the points that they weren't happy about, one of which was the excess violence, I think, on Adam. The other one was the excess violence that Toya and I did with the policeman. And another main thing was the suffocation of Jean October, which had to be cut by a long... They said it was excessive time. So he had to make those, and by the skin of his teeth, it got the certificate just in time for the premiere and everything, because they wouldn't have let it be shown.
And I read that also while in France that Derek shot a Super 8 film of you in the Louvre. Do you recall that?
Oh, yes. I don't know, I can't remember him actually shooting the film, but of course we got thrown out, got asked to leave, because I was not dressed in a manner suitable to be standing in front of the Mona Lisa, and I was taking too much attraction from the wonderful painting. So these security guys just came and took Derek and I away. And we got marched off to the bowels of the Louvre, down these big stone stairs, to this tiny little office where we were told basically to sod off anywhere else but don't come back here. We don't want you. And they gave us this little ticket each, a laissez-faire, which basically go anywhere else but here. And Derek and I just looked at each other, and we went to, I think we went down, I think there's an Egyptian room down there, isn't there? Is there some sort of weird room down at the bottom? And so we got back into the Louvre again with the same ticket. They were so stupid. But yes, it was the Japanese tourists. There was a load of Japanese tourists standing there, and they were all taking photos of me instead of taking photos of the Mona Lisa, which is what started the problem. But we did laugh about it.